In the opening shots, we see Rick Grimes. He's sitting in some room looking at an image of Michonne on his phone. Rick hadn't seen his family in a very long time. And with the glass pressed against his carotid artery, he thinks he'll never see again. But not everyone can say goodbye like that. Rick is an excellent leader, strong-willed, but that nature doesn't really want to die. Grimes removes the glass, and his stingy tear leaves a trail down his swollen cheek. Next, we are shown the events that took place 5 years after the events on the bridge. Then Rick blew up an entire bridge full of zombies with one shot. And all that was left of the man was his hat. No one has ever seen him again. Rick Grimes is now a consignee. They are chained cannon fodder who work to clear the area of the Walking Dead. Consignees are watched over by armed guards. Rick is out in the woods again. He goes as far into the woods as the chain will allow. And he decides to break free of his shackles and go on the run. To do that, he has to say goodbye to the wrist and take off the handcuffs. The man makes it, but the shock of the pain and the Walking Dead around him slows his escape. So, it's no surprise that a stun gun to the back quickly stops him. I have only one thought at this point. How can you sacrifice an arm and not make the most of it so that this sacrifice is not in vain? Rick comes to his senses in his room. He remembers Michonne and spiritually tells her everything that happened to him. On the bridge, he didn't think he would survive. But he was picked up by members of a powerful large army that guards a hidden city with a population of hundreds of thousands. The rescued men go to work on the outskirts of the city, destroying the Walking Dead. They are called consignees. After 6 years of such work, they are allowed to settle in the city itself. But Rick never wanted that. He always wanted to escape, but he never could. Now he is forced to remain a consignee. But he is already a one-armed man, which is not very convenient in his job. Lieutenant Colonel Okafor sees something in Rick's eyes, so he protects him and wants him in his program, in his army. At the end of the workday, Grimes is back in his room. Another escape fails. Depression and a sense of hopelessness set in. In the morning, Rick sits on the riverbank and looks out over the secret city. His colleague Esteban joins him. Tomorrow, he completes his 6-year term and will be able to move to the city and become a full citizen. Esteban seeks to live a normal life, trying to find the positive in everything. Even his buddy's chopped-off arm makes him think that at least now Okafor will stop pushing Rick to join his army. But Esteban learns that Okafor has not given up his attempts. He is very surprised. He says that in this case, it will be easier for Rick to join, so that it will be easier to escape later. After those words, Rick can no longer hear his friend. This thought is firmly planted in his mind. Rick Grimes joins the Civic Republic military, or CRM for short, and begins his military training. He gets a prosthesis that looks like a clenched fist, but a prosthesis with a secret. When you swing it, a long blade pops out of the fist. I don't remember Rick being an assassin, and 100% he doesn't even know about the Assassin's Creed. He dreams about Michonne at night. One such night, he is awakened by a knock at the door. Okafor calls him in to talk, he and Thorne, who has also joined the CRM, as has Rick. Colonel says he will change the army from within. He reveals some secrets. All the people rescued by the soldiers and brought to the city are divided into 2 groups. Group A, strong-willed leaders, they are immediately eliminated by the soldiers. Group B, everyone else who just wants to survive. These become the consignees. Rick and Thorne from Group A, and it was Okafor who helped them survive. He now wants to lead them up the military ladder, so they can be promoted to high ranks and lead the army. Rick decides to play along with the colonel, even though Thorne is not thrilled with the plan. All this just to try and escape again. Throughout the year, Rick studies blueprints of the city, communications, canals, and tunnels. He finds an old buddy in city, Esteban, who is already the director of water supply unit. He tells Rick where a secret tunnel leads. A few more years pass, and now the plan is ready. Soldiers go to a chemical plant on a long-range resource mission. Rick drags the body of a walker in a military uniform there. He cuts off Walker's arm and puts on his badges. All he has to do is blow everything up and hide in the tunnel. Everyone will consider him a crispy barbecue. At the last moment, he spots a child among the walkers. He has to abandon the plan and save the child by eliminating the walkers. After a moment, Thorne comes to the aid with a rifle. She's seen everything and will not let Rick make a mistake. Thorne assures him that by running, Rick signs his own death warrant, as well as those he runs to. Woman convinces Rick to return. Another night, Grimes decides to get rid of Okafor. He just can't live in a cage. He puts a hidden blade to the throat of a sleeping Marine. However, the Marine is extremely displeased and a fight breaks out between them. Okafor does not want to kill him, or let him go. He admits to Rick that he knows the names of his wife and child. In fact, He knows a lot of things. If Rick escapes, Okafor will be the one sent to find the fugitive and his loved ones. The Marine says the movement up the ranks has already begun. In a year, Rick will be at the top, and it won't matter if he wants it or not. After a while, Thorne bursts into Rick's room and turns on the TV. News comes on. One of the 3 cities has fallen. There was a breach through which the zombie entered the city. About 100,000 people have died there. Thorne assures him that secrets will help them survive. Their city is secret, and it is still alive. So they have to stay here and protect the people. Thorne's truth is like a bone in Rick's throat. Rick does not want rank, does not crave power. He doesn't want to protect others, he longs to protect his family and his people. And here we are back at the moment, when the exhausted guy doesn't have the courage to stab himself in the neck. Nature is a stubborn thing, and his nature wants to live stubbornly. In the end, he is forced to give up the idea of escaping. It's not working for him. So Rick decides to face reality. The letters, written over the years for Michonne, face the fire. Grimes burns all the phones with her picture and decides to stay behind to save the world. Rick flies a helicopter with Okafor and the other soldiers. He agrees to the Marines' plans and abandons any thoughts of escape. But at that moment, someone opens fire from the ground. Okafor gets shot and explodes like watermelon. Helicopter falls and crashes. Rick arms himself and runs with the others from the wreckage. But another explosion scatters them. As Grimes crawls to his rifle, someone is systematically sending wounded soldiers to the afterlife. When Rick's turn comes, he looks into the face of his assassin and sees Michonne. Woman can't believe her eyes, and neither can Rick. We see Michonne before she meets her husband. Along the way, she helps a young couple and saves them from death. After that, the couple brings her into their commune. The leader of the commune is the elder sister of the saved woman. She is grateful for the stranger's help and is willing to give her anything she asks for. Michonne immediately decides to take advantage of the situation and asks for a horse. However, the leader suggests that the girl stay with them. They need such a strong member in the team, at least until the migration is complete. Their commune is on the border of 3 states. For some inexplicable reason, at this time of year, crowds of zombie head in the same direction, as if they were migrating. While they talk, a dwarf named Nat enters the room. He is so happy to see his friends alive that he offers Michonne any horse she wants. At the same time, he does not even react to the protests of the leader. Later, he offers the girl to spend the night in their camp, as it will soon be dark. And they take her measurements and give her some cool gear. Michonne agrees to stay, but only for one night. For the morning, she is given sturdy but light armor and the leader's favorite horse. Woman says goodbye to her new friends and gallops off. At the state border, Michonne actually encounters the zombie migration itself. She's never seen so many walking dead in her life. This herd numbers hundreds of thousands of zombies, and it goes from horizon to horizon. Michonne gallops up to the herd herself and tries to widen the passage. She distracts the zombies with dead explosions. That is, she shoots first to the right, then to the left. At first, everything goes according to plan. An open corridor begins to form, but one zombie stubbornly keeps marching forward. Michonne realizes too late that the walker is covered in gasoline canisters. They explode, and the zombie's severed head hits the girl in the shoulder. This knocks her off the horse and she falls to the ground. Michonne gets to her feet and pulls out her katana. She sees that the zombie has heard and seen her. They come, and Michonne realizes that her death is only a matter of time. Tears begin to trickle down her cheeks. At this moment, strong explosions can be heard from left and right, and blue flames shoot up like pillars of fire. Such images cannot leave any walker indifferent. Zombies unencumbered by intelligence, so they follow the sounds of explosions. A long, loose corridor through the herd reappears in front of Michonne. Woman can't figure out who helped her. She turns around and sees her new friends. They decided that running all the time was not for them. So they found Michonne again and made a pass for her. All they have to do is wait until morning, when the corridor widens a bit. In gratitude for their help, Michonne invites her friends to join her and Rick, of course when she finds him. So they all decide to find Rick first, then accept the invitation, and change their location. Michonne and her new commune enters the city. Suddenly they see a helicopter. It flies over the people, but immediately turns around and hangs in position for a moment, as if pondering. Then it flies back and drops chlorine gas on them. Those who do not have time to cover their faces with a cloth begin to suffocate and pass away. Next, as we all know, the dead begin to have a different life. They rise up and attack their friends. The rescued couple, the good-natured dwarf and Michonne, take refuge in a furniture store. Woman is pregnant, and Michonne sees that she is not well at all, nor is the dwarf. They have lack of oxygen. There is a medical center nearby, which means they might have oxygen tanks. Michonne tells the man to tie his fiancée to the bed and not to dare fall asleep next to her. she's going to find the tanks. I don't know by what miracle, but she manages to find some tanks and get back to her friends. By this time, the couple has become zombies and only the dwarf is clinging to life. Michonne's forced to calm them down with her katana. The survivors are holed up in the shop trying to recover. Chlorine burned the lungs and throat lining. Improvements are coming, but not for everyone and very slowly. Time passes, it's already snowing outside and people still can't recover. Here it is, the snow has melted, season is over. Michonne and Nat still try to recover. After a year and a half of living in the furniture store, there were only 2 of them left. They load the cart with the correct parts and strap a walker with no arms or jaw into it. Zombi tries to catch up with them. This means he follows them, rolling the cart behind him. A short time later, they reach the riverbank. Michonne sees a once familiar abandoned boat. She found Rick's boots on it a few years ago. Michonne hoped to find Rick himself on board one day. Now there are piles of coals near the ship that were once humans. She keeps the hope in her heart that her husband is still alive somewhere. Michonne doesn't believe it anymore. They head back. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, they spot a helicopter in the sky. But the dwarf will not run. He's a genius with gunfire and explosions. Nat shoots the helicopter with his inventions until it falls to the ground. Next, as we saw earlier, Michonne finds Rick. A few kisses and hugs. No time for more. CRM will be here soon. Rick doesn't have time to tell his beloved everything. Suddenly, wounded soldier regains consciousness and shoots the dwarf. After a few seconds, Nat closes his eyes. Rick punishes the bully with his sword. Husband quickly gives Michonne a briefing. He'll pull a gun on her. She shouldn't mention Alexandria. She doesn't have to be strong. She has to hide the leadership skills inside. The CRM doesn't need leaders. It was the dwarf who attacked the helicopter and she saved them. Rick promises to find her later and they'll escape. He promises that, and then the helicopters fly towards them. Then there were questions, interrogations, and Michonne was believed. Now she is with Rick in the town they try to escape. Everything seems to be going according to plan, but did everyone take Michonne's word for it? Turns out, they didn't. One evening, Rick returns to his room. There is a scavenger, Anne, also known as Jadis Stokes, waiting for him. The same one who captured him after the bridge explosion and brought him to town many years ago. She knows Rick well, remembers Michonne and all his loved ones. Jadis now investigates the attack on the helicopter. The scavenger knows that Michonne has found her husband, and that the sword belongs to the woman and not to the dwarf. She hasn't gotten it all on the record yet, but Jadis warns Rick not to even hope to escape the city with Michonne. Otherwise, all his loved ones will be eliminated. That's it. The scavenger has blood on her hands, which means she's unstoppable, and she'll do her best. From the first shots, we are taken back to a time when Rick was just becoming a consignee. He and several others were released into the city to show them where they could live in the future. Of course, if they work hard and follow all the instructions. In the park, among the people, Rick meets a scavenger, Jadis. She's been going to the park for a month to meet Rick. Finally, she meets him. But contrary to her expectations, Rick does not throw himself at her with open arms, and does not fill her ears with stupefying words of gratitude for his salvation. Even though she is disappointed, she skillfully hides her feelings. Rick accuses her of bringing him to a place from which there is no escape. In response, she reminds the man that she could have left him at the bottom of the river. So she took him to the city where a new human civilization would begin in the future. Rick prefers to remain silent. Events take us back, but now to a time when Okafor is already dead. Rick has yet to wash off the salty sweat and tomato paste. He shows up at Thorne's apartment. The man tells her about Michonne. She belongs to a Category A, which means she could get liquidated. Rick really needs this not to happen. Michonne has to stay in town. Grimes assures Thorne that he has finally come around to Okafor's ideas. He's in. Now he needs to get Michonne in, so Thorne has to convince her the same way he convinced Rick. We keep jumping back and forth in time in this episode. So now we're in the present, where Rick has Jadis in his room. She tells him that she knows all about him, Michonne, and their escape plan. Rick accuses the scavenger that her actions are to blame, and she doesn't hide it. However, she warns the man that in the event of her sudden and unexplained death, the city authorities will receive a document that they will find among her belongings. This document has the most complete information on Rick and everyone close to him. Neither pleading nor threats help convince Jadis that Michonne does not belong here. Rick is cornered. He cannot flee the city with his wife. He cannot stay here with her forever. And he can't come to terms with Jadis. She's an ideological person, and she's not going to compromise on anything. Rick can't even shoot this smelly woman, because everyone will know about him and Michonne. Meanwhile, Michonne is among the consignees. She spends her workday near the gate with spear in hand. Until the evening, she kills zombies with it. At the end of the day, woman meets her loophole neighbor, Cleo. Michonne introduces herself as Dana and admits that she has a lot of experience exterminating walkers. At that moment, the undead rise from the pile of bodies. They run toward them, but they are still far away. Michonne is not lost. She plunges a spear into the zombie's head. Cleo doesn't notice at all that a walker approaches her from behind. Michonne throws the walker's head at the zombie, knocking it down. She saves her new friend. Later, Okafor's funeral is held in the Great Hall. Rick and Thorn walk around the base together. The woman tells him that Okafor once saved her and changed her life. Just then, the general drives up to them and calls Thorn to talk privately, since he doesn't trust Rick for some reason. The general bluntly tells Rick this to his face and gives him a book on fencing. This is exactly what he gave Okafor before, when he didn't trust him either. Rick takes the book and accompanies the general with a pensive look. Turns out, the general promoted Thorn. As Okafor promised, they are beginning to be promoted. Thorn also tells Rick that the general was very interested in Dana, who is Michonne. Rick discreetly hands Michonne a note telling her they are escaping today. In the locker, she finds a map of the area and her sword. Time to go to the cellar. Rick has already passed it. He's at the bushes where the boat is hidden. Michonne is still in the dark corridors of the cellar. A wave of zombies pours out of the side tunnel. The woman quickens her pace. There is no turning back now, literally or figuratively. Soon she makes her way to the bushes with the boat, but she still can't find Rick. Michonne finds a note from him. He writes that he has to stay to give her a chance to escape. Morning comes. Rick reports to Jadis that Michonne has left, that no one should go after her, because he is staying. He saved his wife and is in a good mood. Then, he goes to work, to watch over the consignees. But to his horror, he notices Michonne among them. Rick meets with her alone. He tries to explain that it is possible to get out if you have someone to back you up from the town. For Michonne, that person is Rick. But the woman will not leave alone. The next day, Thorn orders Dana to go with her and Rick and the rest of the group to clean up the base. There's a breach in the perimeter where the zombies are coming through, about 200 of them. The task is to stop them by placing an explosive device on a breach 100 yards away, in the middle of the enemy. Thorn will plant the bomb, and Dana will operate only with the spear. Her job is to stay with the team and finish off the surviving walkers. If there's a problem, the soldiers need to activate the transmitter on the belt, and all the helicopters in the area will know your location. Briefing is over. Time to move. There's a massacre near the breach. The bomb cart is stuck in the ground and Thorn can't get it out. Michonne takes it upon herself, and as a woman, she's stronger than Thorn. Thorn's yells to stop don't change anything. Michonne is joined by Rick. Together, they roll the bomb to the desired location and run off to the side. After the explosion, Michonne offers her husband to escape. He refuses, saying not now. Thorn takes aim at Michonne, and her finger starts to pull the trigger. At the last moment, Rick, as if by accident, finds himself in the line of fire. He reports that another dozen zombies have been destroyed. At the end of the day, Thorn pulls Rick aside and says he's being promoted too. Also, if he doesn't want her to shoot Dana, he should send her back to the base and forget about her. This is exactly what Rick tells Michonne later. He tells her to run. His place is here. A short time later, the helicopter takes them to the base. Michonne makes a decision. She abruptly slides the door open, grabs Rick, and pushes him out of the chopper with her. Together, they fall into the night. Rick and Michonne fell out of the helicopter and into the water. Once ashore, they broke into an empty but not abandoned apartment building. The smart home system says the optimal temperature will be set in 10 minutes. A serious conversation begins between Rick and Michonne. Michonne hands her husband a piece of paper and begins to praise how interesting his notes were. Let him write another note like that. It's beautiful like poetry, only now it's for their children. Have Rick write about how mom found dad, but he refused to return to the children. From this rant, Rick learns that he has a son in addition to his daughter. Michonne was pregnant when the bridge blew up and Rick disappeared. Rick lost his tracking device in a helicopter crash. He asks Michonne to give him hers. Rick has to call the soldiers or they'll be found anyway. He reveals that Jadis has promised to kill everyone he knows if they escape. Jadis agreed to Michonne's departure, so Rick must convince his wife to leave without him. Smart Home tries to break into the heated conversation by warning that the optimal temperature is about to be set. Rick just doesn't know where the voice is coming from, or he would have ripped out the insides of this deranged system by now. Rick says Michonne should have run away. Then he could live in peace, knowing she was safe. Then Michonne proposes a plan. They return to town, carefully find Jadis' papers, burn them, and then kill the scavenger. Rick doesn't answer anything, he just takes the transmitter from his wife. It is dusk, and they both looked out the window at the skyscraper across the street. The remains of a burning helicopter, their helicopter, sticking out of the wall. When they fell out, the pilot didn't even notice. Because he had another problem, a thunderstorm. The helicopter crashed into the house and burned it down. Michonne laughs. This situation fundamentally changes the whole picture because it means they don't have to go back anymore. Now everyone would consider them dead and no one would come looking for them. That means they can go home in peace. Michonne looks at Rick and her smile slowly fades. The man doesn't accept reality. Despite everything, he wants to go back to the town. Michonne cannot believe her ears. She looks at her husband and decides to sum up. Rick confirms her words. After a moment, she makes a decision. She has been looking for him. She has found him. She has met him. She has even persuaded him. But now she is going back to her children. At this point, the smart home apologizes that the thermal indicator is broken, so it won't be able to set the optimal temperature. It was a lot to put up with, but no one expected such meanness from a smart home. Michonne leaves the room and heads down the stairs to the exit. Rick holds on to the last and tries not to rush after her, but he can't, so he runs after Michonne. At that moment, a helicopter flies up to its burnt-out counterpart and fires a few rockets at its wreckage. Zombies pile up outside the front doors as Michonne prepares for the breach. Explosions from incoming missiles shake the building next door where our heroes are hiding. The glass doors shatter, allowing the dead to enter. Rick protects his wife from flying shrapnel. Then they run back into the room and try to get away from the zombie. The couple locks themselves in a gym and begins to sort things out again. If you take a little break from everything that is going on and look at this episode from the side, it is very noticeable that it sags significantly, as if the writers were in a stupor at that moment. Rick looks so stupid that I want to punch him in the face. Zombies find them there, probably attracted by the heroes whining. Rick and Michonne break through the crowd of walkers, but a large chandelier falls on them on the stairs. Woman's leg is trapped, and the walkers are quite close. To Rick's credit, he didn't leave his wife like she asked, otherwise I would have just stopped watching the movie at that point. While his wife fights off the zombie, he tries to lift the chandelier. On the third try, he succeeds, and Michonne frees herself. A little later, they take refuge in the room, and that's when passion strikes the couple. After all, there is no danger. The whole building is falling apart. Zombies have taken over the place and are trying to break into the room from all sides. But none of those matters. They have more important things to do now. As far as I can see, Rick is the fastest hand in the West. And what do you think they talk about when the love fuse goes out? Right, about how Rick wants to stay to change humanity. Michonne claims that Rick hasn't actually surrendered yet, because he never turned on the transmitter that informs the soldiers their location. She tells her husband that they're not going anywhere until they decide what to do. Thankfully, Michonne has the patience not to snap and gently convinces her husband to come home with her. They smash the transmitter and grab their backpacks. Then the couple rush out of the building and choose a car to go home. A yellow Nissan fits the bill. The car starts to move. Michonne watches the high-rise they came from collapse in the rearview mirror. She convinces her husband, and now they are driving home in a car with a full tank of gas. They have a good head start because they're not supposed to be hunted. A well-known priest from the main series, Gabriel, is walking through the forest. He's got a machete and easily get rid of the zombie. Gabriel hears helicopters flying in the sky, and when he sees them, he begins to pray. Meanwhile, a yellow Nissan drives through the city. The atmosphere in the salon is as peaceful as possible, because there are no more disagreements between the two, only urgent problems that are solved as they arise. For example, a long journey requires food. Michonne pulls up next to a small van where they find a large supply of instant noodles. On the way, they see an abandoned establishment. Rick and Michonne decide to stock up on supplies again, and they enter the building. The next day, they arrive at a national park. In the woods, they come across a trio of strangers who need help. They have been attacked by a zombie, but an unusual walker. Trinity thanks them for the help, and the couple gives each of them a package of noodles. All would be well, but the strangers want more. The men pull out a gun and order Rick and Michonne to give them everything.
We could roll this back to you just saying thanks if you want.
Hell no.
But rejected, they neutralize the men in a matter of seconds. They were really offended by such ingratitude. Michonne even takes the noodles back and they leave. They find an abandoned cabin where they decide to spend the night. Rick sets up a stretch so the uninvited guests can't surprise them. Michonne worries that the trio left behind will come after them, but Rick is sure they won't. He also found it amusing that Michonne took back the noodles. Rick finds a bottle of something to drink on the shelf, and the evening gets interesting. A little later, Rick gives his wife a pendant with the letter M on it, and the couple hugs. They don't see a dark figure approaching their house and carefully disarming the trap, and then we're thrown back 3 years. We see the priest in the forest again. Jadis finds him and asks him not to tell anyone she was here. Gabriel hugs the woman and begs her to forgive him. They didn't believe her. We return to the present and see a dark figure enter the house and wake Rick and Michonne. This is Jadis. She finds the fugitives. She holds a gun in each hand and orders Michonne to tie them up. Afterward, she thanks our heroes that their death will not reveal the connection between her and Alexandria. She then raises her guns, but Rick and Michonne are quicker. Rick dives under the bed and Michonne jumps behind the door. After a moment, Rick throws the bed at Jadis and Michonne hits her in the side with an axe. The attacker is wounded, but manages to get away. And once again, we are thrown into the past, this time 2 years ago. Gabriel speaks with Jadis again. The scavenger visits the priest once a year to talk to him. She meets with him, thus violating her instructions. Jadis won't reveal the town's secret, and she refuses to help the commune with food because of it. The priest tells her that Rick confessed to him on the bridge that he wanted to marry Michonne. Later, Gabriel found the ring and gives it to Jadis, asking her to keep it. Jadis and Gabriel arrange to meet again exactly 1 year later at the same time and place. We flash forward to the present. The injured scavenger tries to escape, and Rick and Michonne chase after her in their yellow Nissan. The two are convinced that the woman is alone, so she must be caught at all costs. The race for survival begins. After a few hundred yards, Michonne manages to push Jadis's car into a ravine. The couple comes down the trail and finds no one in the car. The scavenger encounters the very trio, who tried to take all the food from Rick and his wife. Jadis promises to take them back to her commune. In exchange, they have to help her get to a place a few miles away. Rick and Michonne see red spots on the trees and follow the trail. A house is visible ahead. Rick and Michonne go inside. They sense something is wrong. Laundry is hanging everywhere, blocking the view. Nevertheless, the house is searched and a dark figure is found, but it turns out to be the woman of the trio. The others surround our heroes, pointing guns at them. Jadis is behind everyone and commands them to calm down the couple. Rick asks to roll it all back before it's too late, but they don't hear him. Eventually, zombies emerge from dark corners and nooks and attack the trio. Jadis tries to shoot Rick, but they manage to take cover. As is tradition, we are transported 1 year back in time. Jadis is back in the forest. She's waiting for Gabriel. He managed to survive this year and comes to the meeting. Gabriel says he's been dreaming all along of them going to Alexandria together. The couple kiss, but afterward, Jadis replies that she regrets her frank words. It's her job, so he shouldn't take offense, nothing personal. After saying these words, the scavenger knocks the priest to the ground and points a gun at him. We are back in the present. Rick yells for Jadis to come out and talk. The scavenger explains that the documents are well hidden. If anything happens to her, Alexandria and everyone they love will be destroyed. As a result, Rick and Michonne are forced to offer her the only possible option that will keep everyone alive. Michonne goes home. Jadis says nothing about her and Alexandria. Then Rick takes her back to the city to build a new future. At the end, everyone throws down their guns, but Jadis has saved her gun and now aims it at Rick. Michonne, who had left, returns with a gun. She orders the scavenger to drop the weapon. Jadis only remembers the priest. She didn't shoot him. Now she doesn't have time to kill anyone either, as the zombies suddenly appear from behind. Rick and Michonne kill the zombies, but they manage to bite Jadis. Jadis realizes she is finished and tells them where the documents are. She gives Rick the priest's ring. Michonne tells her that they will get the documents and then do whatever it takes to stop the army. The whole thing ends with Rick picking up a gun from the floor and sending Jadis far away. Outside, Rick pulls out a ring and officially proposes to Michonne. Ahead, they see a helicopter. And somewhere far away in the woods, a priest is waiting for a woman. Exactly 1 year has passed, which means it's time for a meeting, but no one comes. After a what-to-do briefing, Rick heads back to town. He is met by Thorne, and she is very happy to have him back. She says Okafor's plans were nonsense. He was in the clouds when you need to be on your feet. Rick asks her to talk about how she sees things for herself. Meanwhile, Michonne in a CRM uniform infiltrates the base. Their target is Jadis's office, which should contain documents on Alexandria. Thorne takes Rick to the general. She says that the time has finally come, and now Rick will learn the true purpose and scope of the army's mission. The general is in no hurry to reveal all the cards at once. He seems to revel in the moment, stretching out the rubber. And Michonne searches the scavenger's office. As a result, she finds the right papers and tears them into many pieces. Before she can leave the office, a soldier brings a letter for Jadis and enters the room. Michonne has no choice but to hug the occasional visitor very tightly. So far, the general has said nothing. It's like some kind of ceremony for him, which irritates Rick and me to no end. The old man talks about how many times he's done a full briefing in his life, which elite soldiers sat where Rick sits now. All of this is so boring that Rick has long been with his thoughts, remembering Michonne. The general talks about where he grew up, how he lived, and what he did in Pittsburgh. And then came the revelations Rick had been waiting for. The general says that their army destroys communes, destroy their partners, to increase their own resources. 18 hours left before their city, and the army become the largest commune on the continent. In other words, the army will destroy Portland. And then it would all be presented as a great tragedy. Next, the army will abolish the council and declare martial law. Rick listens to all this horror and slowly pulls out a knife. Because he was forced to put the rest of the weapons on the table in front of the general. At the base, soldiers are given a brief instruction on how Portland will be destroyed. The main thing is not to give in to emotion, because the end justifies the means. The general continues. Rick grips the knife tighter and tighter, but only until the general's next words. He's willing to make an exception for Rick because he believes the man can be their leader for the next 10 years. So, he wouldn't mind if Rick brought his whole family into town to make sure they were as safe as possible. It's an option that makes Rick think twice. The general asks Rick to swear on his sword to be loyal to him and his cause. This is the sword Rick uses to calm the general down a minute later. Rick reports to Thorne that he's been briefed. The general has decided to leave on business, and he has a job to do, so they'll meet a little later than planned. Rick then stuffs the general's body into a box and carries it to the elevator. It is not possible to get to the other floor alone. A soldier enters the elevator, and everything would be fine, but red liquid starts to spill out of the box onto the floor of the elevator. A little more, and the soldier will notice. Meanwhile, Michonne returns from the base the way she came, but she stops at the last moment. She can't let things go, even after learning everything. The woman turns and heads back to the base. Rick has no choice but to take care of the giant man. Before he gets rid of the soldier, he manages to take a pretty good bite out of his opponent. The elevator doors open again and Rick sees another soldier, but it turns out to be the returning Michonne. Their plans collide. Their return will have to wait. First, they have to stop the soldiers. Meanwhile, Thorne is in the woods. She remembers her radio conversation with Rick and doesn't believe what he told her. Thorne is determined to find out. Back at the base, Rick and Michonne prepare explosives. Unbeknownst to them, Thorne is already doggedly searching for Rick. She's pretty sure he betrayed her. In Rick's room, she finds his prosthetic. For some reason, the prosthetic clears up her last doubts. Rick and Michonne deliver explosives to an ammunition depot. They hang grenades all over the place. Each one can be pulled out at the same time by pulling a common cord. The general and the soldier from the elevator are hidden in the next box. Both are already zombies. Rick ties the end of the cord to them, then unties the walkers and lets them go. A large number of soldiers are gathering near the depot as a very important speech is about to be given. None of the soldiers have any idea what to expect. Thorne is probably the only one who has a clue, so she's already heading for the depot. Rick and Michonne run out of the depot with little time before the explosion, but Thorne blocks their path with a rifle. She orders them to go back to the depot and put everything back the way it was. The couple has no choice but to obey, and then a fantastic thing happens. The general and the soldier pull the string and the pin out of each grenade. Rick and his wife hide under the flag, and it saves them from being blown up. Seconds later, a chlorine cloud descends on the site of the explosion. How Thorne stayed alive is also unclear, but she's already wearing a gas mask and looking for traitors. Michonne runs off to find another mask, and Rick lunges at Thorne. At one point, walkers surround him and push him back into the container. Thorne is attacked by Michonne. She assures her that love never dies and keeps asking Thorne where Rick is. Michonne ends up stabbing her with her sword. Rick tries to save himself with a grenade. There is an explosion and several bodies go flying in different directions. Michonne turns sharply and realizes that Rick was in the middle of the walkers. A sword falls from her hand, but you know how tough Rick is. Rick gets out unharmed under the zombies and hugs his wife. In the end, the city council takes control of the remnants of the army, and Rick and Michonne fly home. Finally, Rick Grimes meets his son for the first time. The whole family is together at last.